Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Whenever you're watching this, it's totally fine. Um, I wanted to do just a quick check-in with you guys and make sure that you understand the difference between point source pollution and non-point source pollution. So those are two very different types of pollution. And in a picture like this is showing some examples of both point source and non-point source. So if you look in the middle here, it says point source. So some examples of point source are like a wastewater treatment plant. If there was a pipe going directly into the water here, and if you could point with your finger and say, that's where the pollution is coming from, that's an example of point source. Over here on this side, there's a pipe going into the water here. So whatever this factory is producing has some kind of waste, and it needs to be processed appropriately in order to legally be dumped into a water system. So if you could point directly to the area where the pollution is coming from, that would be point source. So those are point source. Non-point source. Non-point source are a little bit harder to identify. And non-point source comes from all over. So over here on the left over here, you see this suburban development. So any kind of runoff that would be in these people's yards, fertilizer, dog poop, oil from maybe changing the oil on their cars, stuff dripping from their cars, anything that is on the ground can run off when it rains. It can seep into the groundwater. It can continue just going down. It's going to go to the lowest elevation, and eventually it's going to land in our river system. So think about how the watersheds were set up and how the water all flows down. So we're in the Yadkin Pee Dee River Basin. The lowest point in our river basin is the Yadkin Pee Dee River. So the pollution is going to eventually make it to that river system. You live in a tiny watershed, so your little watershed probably has a creek nearby. So your water is going to run into that creek, which is going to eventually run into the Yadkin Pee Dee River. I mean, maybe miles away, but eventually it could get there. So non-point can come from suburban developments. It can come from streets in a city, homes out in the country, crops, big non-point source pollution issue is farming. So all the fertilizers that run off, all of these cows that are pooping and making lots of manure, that is eventually going to run itself down into the river system here. And, you add that kind of stuff to the water and you can get eutrophication, lower oxygen levels. It can lead to poor water quality. So non-point source pollution is a really big deal. Hopefully that helps just with understanding the difference between the two. Just to go through some quick definitions. Point source, pollution that comes from a specific source. So you can see in this picture, the yellow arrow here, right there is where the pollution is hitting the water. So if you can point your finger to the spot where it's going into the water, then it is point source. If you look at a picture like this, this is all non-point source. So just to read the definition, it says a widely spread source of pollution that can't be tied to a specific point of origin is called non-point source. So you cannot point your finger directly at where it's coming from. You'd be going, it's there. It's coming from everywhere. So runoff is your best example of non-point source pollution. So it can be runoff, urban runoff from streets and cars and things like that. It can be cropland runoff from farming. So that's the quick difference between point source and non-point source pollution. I'm going to take a second here to show you just a quick demonstration. I'll have to make sure that you can see. It looks like it's not very, very bright. Let me turn this off. I'll turn the camera off for a second and let me get this set here. Make sure that you can see. And what I'm just trying to demonstrate here is this right here is just a river system. It's kind of hard to tell from the angle where the camera is, but this is a hill, and then you go down the hill and it is the river system toward the bottom. So we talked about point source pollution. So you could demonstrate point source pollution with perhaps some food coloring. So I'm going to use red food coloring here just to show point source pollution. So maybe there is a factory that is making waste, and they've got a pipe that's going directly into the river system. So there could be a point source right here. So you're going to see it's going to be a really concentrated spot. So that would be a point source. Maybe there is an old abandoned building, and 45 years ago, there was a company there that used some kind of hazardous liquids, and they had a bunch of barrels, and maybe those barrels are buried underground here, and that chemical is just slowly seeping into the groundwater. Eventually it can erode and it can travel down to the lower elevation. So you can see that these are small, but they're very concentrated. That is in contrast or different than if you have non-point source pollution. So I'm going to use this blue to demonstrate non-point source pollution. So maybe over here we have a farm, and you've got lots of cows and lots of manure. Maybe over here you have a cornfield. Maybe over here we have a neighborhood. Maybe over here is the city of Charlotte, right? And so those areas just have a lot of pollution, but it's widespread over a bigger area. So think about what happens when it rains. So it starts to rain, and you're going to see things start to change. They're going to start to spread. And you can see that the non-point source pollution is spread over a lot bigger area. And over time, that is going to run off and run down into the river system. So 2 very different types of pollution. Which one do you think is going to be harder to control? Which one do you think is worse? Do you have an idea on that? Actually, it might seem like point source is worse, but it's not, because point source we can actually fix. So if we can find the source, we can fix the problem. Non-point source is a much bigger issue. So much bigger issue. And reason it's a much bigger issue is because it's really difficult to control. It is widespread and very difficult to control. So anyway, I hope that helps you understand the difference between point source and non-point source. And if you will take your little check-in for me, that would be fabulous. And it won't take you long. It's only 10 questions. I think each of them only have 2 answer choices. So you should be done in 5 minutes and on with your day. Anyway, hang in there, and I will see you soon. Bye.